Here we have another person's Saptamsa. This is a woman's chart. Okay, starting with Jupiter, the most important planet in the Saptamsa. Jupiter's in a good house from the ascendant, from the first house, and sitting in the 10th, the Karma Baba. It's always a good placement, and whenever an important planet or an important house lord is in the 10th sign from the ascendant, it always indicates more karma, more action revolving around that area. And also you might remember I've mentioned in the past that when you start getting a lot of planets in Vargas 1, 4, 7, a lot of planets in the 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th signs from the ascendant, it makes that Varga a more important Varga. And in this chart we've actually got 4 planets in the angles in 1, 4, 7, and 10. That's 4 out of 7. And don't include Rahu and Ketu in that technique. So that's a lot of planets. Whenever you get 4, it's bound to be an important Varga for the person. So that means relationships and children and being productive with relationships is going to be a really huge part of this person's life. Now Jupiter in the Rashi chart is conjunct Rahu. And whenever Rahu is conjunct Jupiter, that's a difficult yoga. It's called Guru Chandala Yoga. And in a woman's chart, it tends to be a bigger problem in the context of children. You always find women who've got Jupiter conjunct Rahu will have some stress revolving around children. Okay, so we want to keep that Rahu in mind. Now, Jupiter himself is in a natural friend sign in the Saptamsa, so he gets some delight there. But his lord, Mars, is sleeping in Virgo. So his friend Mars really can't help him. Also, in the Saptamsa, we've got Mars in the 8th house. Mars in the 8th house is never a good thing. In fact, anytime you see Varga in the 6th sign from the ascendant, or Mars in the 8th sign from the ascendant, that shows some trouble and difficulty revolving around that area. Okay? When it's in the 6th house, it's hard for the person to make the choices and take the, let's say, to do the right things when there's trouble, and so it's hard to solve problems. When Mars is in the 8th, it can be destructive. Okay, like John Kennedy had Mars in the 8th from his ascendant. Well, that was one of the big reasons he died young. It's because that Mars destroyed the body. And you'll usually find people who've got Mars in the 8th in the Rashi chart, they go through a lot physically usually. Unless there are some really helpful other factors. So we see Mars in the 8th indicating some element of destruction revolving around children. Okay, so we want to keep that in mind. But yeah, Jupiter is not, even though he's in a natural friend sign, Mars can't help him because he's sleeping in Virgo. Other than that, Mars is helped by a strong sun to 19 points, who's his friend, a decent moon to 36 points. Then he's hurt by his enemy Mercury, and he's hurt by his enemy Venus. Okay, and Venus can hurt him only to 8 points of aspect, but since Venus is exalted to a full dose. Okay, so it's a mixed Jupiters. What did I just do? I just looked at Mars. Okay, forget what I just said. Going back to Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter gets held by the Sun to 17 points, who's strong in Leo. Jupiter is not helped by his friend Mars because Mars is sleeping. Then Jupiter's hurt by his friend Mercury, who's in a natural neutral sign, so that'll hurt him about half of 11. Then he's thrashed by Venus to 40 points because Venus is exalted and gives the full measure of strength. So Jupiter has some delight from Mars by being in Mars' sign, but that delight's not really going to be effective because Mars is sleeping. So effectively he gets like 17 points of delight from the Sun, but 40 points of Shudita, of starvation, from Venus. So Jupiter's not that good. And then it's set up in the beginning to have trouble with children due to it being with Rahu. And then its lord is in Mars in the 8th, which is never a good place for Mars to be in any Varga. So we see some potential trouble in this Varga. Okay? Now, because Jupiter starved mostly. But then it's still in the 10th, so there's a lot of activity around that. All right. The 7th house, actually let's look at the star, or not the star, the Jupiter Saptamsa Lord. So it's Shira. And if you remember as a refresher, was it Shira or Shara? I think it's Sun's in Shira, not Shara. Okay, no, Jupiter is in Shara. Okay, so this is the first Saptamsa of an odd sign or the last Saptamsa of an even sign. So that's any corrosive liquids such as saline, alkaline, etc. So this shows a lot of pent-up creative energy, a whole bunch of creative energy. And since Jupiter's not in great shape, there'll be a lot of this will be pent up. Okay, so this person does have a lot of sexual pent energy. They, easily meet men and have sex with them. Okay, because there's all this pent up sexual energy. Because Jupiter has some afflictions and it's in the Shara Saptamsa. Okay. So not a great Jupiter by any means, but at least he's in the 10th sign from the ascendant and has the help of the sun. Now the sun's the most important planet as far as the Baba Lord is concerned because he is in its own sign in the 7th, ruling the 7th. And the sun's influenced by his enemy Mars, who's sleeping and therefore who can't help, by Jupiter, his friend, to 1 point, by Saturn, his enemy, to 35 points. But Saturn's sleeping, so he's not going to hurt the sun in this Varga. So we basically get a very Garvita, proud sun, because he's in the first 20 degrees of Leo, which is his Mula Trikona. So this person with that strong sun, will have a great capacity for meeting, connecting with other people, have a lot of faith for embracing others, and actually get pregnant relatively easily too, which has all been true for this person. Okay. The first Lord is the second most important, or one of the other important planets. You could say the second most important house Lord. And that's Saturn. Saturn is sleeping in Mars' sign. Saturn's influenced by enemy Sun, enemy Moon. Enemy Mars is sleeping though, so not hurting it. Then friend Mercury and Venus are helping it. But all in all, there's a lot more enemies. Of course, its enemy Mars can't hurt it for being in that sign, but still we get a strong Sun and a relatively strong Moon. And so there is some more Shuddhita misery placed upon Saturn. So the Lagna Lord's not in really good shape. Okay? The Lagna itself, let's pull up the planetary aspects to the cusp. Okay. The Lagna itself has Mercury and Moon in it, conjunct it. Mercury's in a friend sign, so he's helping the Lagna. But the Moon's in an enemy sign, so he's hurting the Lagna. And he's going to hurt it more than Mercury's helping it, because an enemy's dignity smashes things a lot more than a friend's dignity can help it. Then it's influenced by Mars, who's in a neutral sign, in dignity-wise. So Mars isn't hurting it. It's aspected by Venus, who's exalted, so Venus is helping it. By Saturn, its Lord, to a huge degree. Unfortunately, Saturn is he's in a neutral sign, so he actually can help his Lagna a little bit. Okay? But there's still this big hit of the Moon, one of the strong aspects. Let's see. Strong conjunctions. And the Moon is an enemy sign, is going to hurt more than its Lord in the neutral. So it's a really mediocre Lagna Bhava. And so, again, the Lagna just shows how embraceable a person is, how strong their magnetism is, and so on. And it's like average. This would be this person, from a point of sexual attraction, would be average of sexual attraction. But compare that to the really strong 7th house. Okay, we've seen the 7th Lord is nice and Garvita, proud. The seventh house is aspected by the sun in its own, by its Lord, really strongly. It's aspected by the moon, which is hurting it, but then Mercury helps it, Jupiter helps it, Venus helps it a lot. Saturn does hurt it, but the seventh house is a lot better than the Lagna. And so this person actually has better luck in her love life than a person would think by looking at her. Okay, even later in life, when she started having some health complications, basically an injury that kept her from exercising. She gained a lot of weight, and even throughout that time, she still had no trouble meeting men. Okay, because her seventh house is stronger than the first house, so there's always someone there ready to embrace her. Okay, so seventh house is strong. Venus is the other important planet to look at in the Saptamsa, and that has to do with more the enjoyment of the creative process of the relationship with the person you're creating with, and of course the sex itself. Venus is exalted, his Garvita proud. He's conjunct the sun in the Rashi, so the sun is going to hurt him a little, agitate Venus somewhat, but not enough to ruin that Venus. Then Venus influenced by his neutral Mars, neutral Jupiter, friend Saturn, but friend Saturn sleeping, so he can't help. But an exalted planet is always going to withstand a conjunction of the sun. Okay, it always have a little more pride than agitation. So it's a proud but somewhat agitated Venus. So it's a pretty good Venus. So for the most part, this person has enjoyed their sex life quite well. Okay, and had a very active sex life with exalted Venus, and then the strong seventh bhava that we see. But again, remember this Jupiter's not looking really pretty, so we'll get to that in a little bit too. First, we're just going to kind of study the foundation of the chart. The other important bhava to look at is the fourth bhava, and that one is ruled by Venus, the fourth and ninth lord, ruled by that nice Venus we just talked about. The bhava itself is aspected by strong sun, hurt by the moon, but helped by Mercury, helped by Jupiter, helped by Venus a little bit. But Jupiter's in a great friend sign, Mercury's in a friend sign, Venus is exalted, Sun is in Mula Trikona. All that's going to much more than make up for this aspect from the moon, which is damaging the ninth house. So the ninth house is really good. And I wanted to look at that house too. We're going to look at the fourth too. The fourth, I think, is even a little better. The fourth house has the strong aspect of the sun to 34 points. It's hurt by the moon. Mars is indifferent towards it. Mercury helps at the 39. Jupiter to 10. Venus by 15. But Saturn hurts it by conjuncting it in the Rashi chart. But Saturn's in a neutral sign, so he's not going to hurt it. So this is a really good fourth house and a really good ninth house. There's some blemish from the moon, but otherwise it's good. Good, strong fourth house with the wonderful fourth lord, who just so all happens to also be the ninth lord. So this person, the fourth house again, is the place for your dynasty to expand, a place to have your dynasty, starting with your house. You need your room for your dynasty to expand. So when this person had children, shortly after having her children, I think her second child was just a few years, maybe 2 years old or one, her husband died of leukemia. At that point, however, her husband's friend, who was a lawyer, bought her a house and covered all the house payments as long as the children lived with her. So for the next 17 years, a lawyer was making her house payments for her. So you see this, she had this good fate to have a place for her dynasty. Okay, a much bigger, nicer place than they really needed. I mean, it was a nice house, pretty good house in a good neighborhood. And so we had this nice fourth lord, which shows there's always going to be room for her dynasty. So she wasn't hardly making any money. Her husband was the one bringing the money in, and he dies, leaves her with not a whole lot. And he was just starting in his career too, so it's not like they'd saved up lots of money. They really didn't have much. They had, put a down payment on a house and started making payments for the next 30 years or something. Then he dies. So his friend, a lawyer, takes over, buys the house, lets her live in it for free, and makes the house payments on the house. So you see how that nice Venus works. And the reason I mentioned it's interesting that it's a lawyer, because it's the 9th house that represents lawyers. And Venus is also rules that 9th house. And it's a nice planet here. So her dynasty had a place to be, okay, in the world, which is nice. So her children have always been lucky that way, though obviously not in other ways. Now, she had her children in Rahu Dasha, okay? Rahu Dasha can always give children if it's nicely situated in the Saptamsa. Well, Rahu is going to give the results of the 4th and 9th Lord, and Venus, its Lord, is exalted. No problem, okay? Rahu Dasha is certainly going to give children. After Rahu Dasha came Jupiter Dasha. Now, Jupiter, we've seen, has some serious starvation to it. And its friend Mars, that we see trying to help him, can't really do a whole lot. He's hurt more than by Mercury and Venus. And then Mars is with Rahu. In Jupiter Dasha, she actually had a series of abortions during that time, which is, you will commonly find there. Now, the reason the abortions happened is because Jupiter does have that starvation of Mercury and Venus aspecting him. But a large part of the reason is because Mars, who rules it, is in the 8th. And just the fact that Mars is in the 8th house in the Saptamsa, and it's a bad Mars too, it's a sleeping Mars, shows there's going to be some loss of children or some tragedy in respect to their dynasty, their offspring, okay? Or and especially the Saptamsa is about creating the children, creating the dynasty. Once you have your children, then they become the 5th house in the Rashi and the 5th house in the Trimsamsha. That's their physical well-being. But the process of creating the children or creating the dynasty, that's the Saptamsa. And so with Mars in the 8th, there's going to be some obstacles, some destruction to that. And so 4 abortions happened in Jupiter Dasha. Okay? But Rahu Dasha with Venus exalted, and Venus in the 2nd house from the ascendant, she just took on the responsibility of having children during that time. Okay? No worries, because Venus was so strong. So when Rahu and Jupiter are together, either dasha can be problematical for children. It all depends which planet's worse, and all in all in the Saptamsa. While Jupiter is worse in the Saptamsa, Rahu is quite good because his Lord is so nice. Okay? Okay. Best planet in the Saptamsa is Venus and the Sun. Sun is almost better because he's got his only enemy, Saturn. Well, actually, Sun suffers some damage by being conjunct Venus here. And Venus suffers some damage conjunct the Sun. But they're both, decently solid planets. So, we'll look at both of those. The deity of Venus is Shuddha-jala, okay, which is the pure water, and it's the creative stage with your offspring of being able to just let them be, to be detached and just have the sheer enjoyment and take back and have a break with it all and just enjoy them. Well, that's something with Venus being in that dignity that this person has a pretty good ability with, actually. Venus is there, no problem. So Venus has to do with how we teach our children, what we teach our children too, even long after they've moved out. And so this person has a really healthy perspective with that due to this nice Venus. They're not overly fiddling with their children. They don't ignore their children. They just enjoy what they're doing, and they offer their advice when the kids ask for it, basically. The sun is strong, and it's strong, and it's the seventh lord. So that's the Shira. And that's especially has to do with conception. The seventh house is the house of the actual conception, coming together to create a child. And that's the Shira, which is the milk Saptamsa ruled by the moon. And so this person, was very open to having kids when they had kids. In the Jupiter dasha, that wasn't so much there. You see, Jupiter's in that Shara, which is that creative energy, but then it's afflicted, which makes it, get more frustrated. So that an afflicted planet in the Shara Saptamsa, like Jupiter is, really readily gets frustrated. So that creative energy gets frustrated, it doesn't get to come out. That's another negative thing about that Jupiter. The Shara Saptamsa is much more likely to create difficulties. If the planet in the Shara Saptamsa is in good shape, then he's not really going to cause a lot of problems. But when he starts getting in bad shape, he'll cause problems the fastest out of any other Saptamsa, because that creative energy can get frustrated so easily then, and be destructive or corrosive. And that's what happened with this person, Jupiter. There's enough weakness to it, and it's in the Shara Saptamsa, and its Lord Mars is in the 8th. There's like 3 strings, 3 bad things attached to it to take it down. Okay, the Lagna Lord is in the Dadi Saptamsa, which is the Mars-ruled Saptamsa, or the Mars quality Saptamsa, which is the coagulated milk or the yogurt. Okay? And Mars is sleeping, and Mars is influenced by friend Sun, friend Moon, hurt by enemies Mercury, and enemy Venus, held by friend Jupiter. So it's a sleeping Mars, but it has a lot of help by its friends, and then some hold-ups by enemies. So it's a mixed Mars. It's a mediocre Mars. It does get a lot of help by some friends, which is helpful. But it's still it's mediocre. When it comes to the struggles of fixing things, that can get in the way of them being successful in their relationship and making something happen with someone. There's times where they approach that mediocrely. That Saptamsa always shows an issue of working out problems with a partner. And Mars there's just so with that. And then he's in the 8th house, where he kind of likes to attract partners. So that Mars has a lot to do with not only breaking partnerships too, because the Saptamsa again is embracing someone to create something new, and Mars there can break that embrace. And Mars is in the Saptamsa of working out the troubles that might come, the natural obstacles to make the process happen. And Mars is just so with that. So sometimes they are able to work through it, just as often they're not able to work through the next obstacle, and they just find it easier to not stay with a particular person. So again, the Saptamsa is an important chart to look at in general for partnerships. Let's see, what else is important? That's the most important things in this chart, I think. Okay, so I think enough said on that. I think I covered what I wanted to in that one, in general. All right, thank you.